Welcome to the Purple Winds podcast, where we explore leadership, resilience, and transformation through stories that have spanned industries and continents. I'm your host, Mina Johl. Today's guest, Roger Hallett, has spent 4 decades shaping the automation landscape, leading teams and strategies for some of the world's most respected technology firms, including Siemens, ABB, Festo, and Phoenix Contact. From apprenticeships in the UK to senior leadership across Europe, Japan, Southeast Asia, and Canada, he brings not only deep industry knowledge, but also the wisdom of global leadership, navigating cultural differences, technological revolutions, and organizational transformation. Roger, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. That sounds very good when you read it out like that, actually.
Having worked across the UK, Germany, and Asia before settling in Canada, how did those early cross-cultural experiences shape your approach to leadership and innovation?
Yeah, it's a good question, actually. And I think it's one that you don't often look back and think about what you were like when you started out. But I've got maybe a couple of anecdotal things which I'll try to answer that question at least. So I mean, I grew up in the UK. I was a young engineer in the UK. I think my travel experiences were not very much at the age of 25 and 26. And but I was an engineer working very hard on automation, and we might talk about later what automation was like back in those days. But I worked on a project in Japan. So I ended up on a plane at the age of 27 with a couple of other engineers and ended up in the middle of Tokyo having a meeting with JGC, Japan Gas Corporation. And it really, first of all, I found it extremely uncomfortable. I realized all the things I didn't know. And suddenly I realized there's a whole gulf of experience and knowledge between me as being my little engineer in the UK and what the world's all about. And fast forward 25 years, I'm living in Japan and I'm looking back thinking, what was wrong with me that at that age I didn't recognize what an opportunity that was. So that was one experience. Another experience was I moved to Germany shortly after that, actually, and I spoke a bit of German, and this was in 1987. And in 1987, when you go to pick up the key for your apartment, or you go to the Arbeitsamt, to register yourself in the city, nobody's speaking English, or at least they can, but they're not speaking English with you. So I also had the experience of having grown up thinking English was going to get me everywhere, to suddenly realize you need to speak another language. You're not able to communicate. And I think some of those experiences, were real levelers for me at that age. They really made me think there's a lot more to this than meets the eye. There's a lot more to this than the experiences that you've had. But if you want to be part of that world, you're going to have to get over those hurdles and barriers and deal with it. So I think those were two very early on things for me that made what I thought was my career, I've got it all figured out, to suddenly realizing, no, you don't. There's a lot more to what you need to do. And it wasn't technology. It was all about the cultural aspects that you just mentioned, language being an aspect of culture as well. So those are just two things. But I think I learned and I'm learning to be a leader at that point as well, at that age. And I'm realizing that the way I lead my team of salespeople or engineers in the UK is not working very well in Japan or other countries I was in. So I learned all through that process, really, not just how important it is to, you often can't get into another culture, but you certainly can appreciate it, and you can behave in a way, you can adapt your style to a way that's going to be much more successful and much more acceptable, and made you much more acceptable as well. So I had a whole bunch of those things hit me straight between the eyes, to be honest. And looking back on that 30 years, I think they really shaped the way. I mean, I go home and talk to my mom these days, and she thinks I've changed significantly, just the way I look at the world to the way that I looked at the world back then. So those are some of the things, I guess, that shaped my experience. And the only other thing I would say is my father was a very D-type person, very task-driven. My mum, a little bit task-driven, but very people-driven. And I've ended up maybe with a balance of the two. And so that, that people piece, that wanting to know about people and wanting to learn about people, I found that helped a lot, because some of the ways of understanding these cultural things is you have to talk to people. You have to get involved. You can't do it from your office. You need to get out and you need to speak some of the language.
And I'm going back was a bit of a culture for me.
I have that experience in Germany. I did go back, and the moment I got off the ferry, I was doing the right thing. Nothing wrong with nothing. Was just not good, going more things ahead of me, and it's a bit like there's a bit like there's a string around you, and you're like, pull on this thread and see what comes up next. So I had that experience. So I'm getting out of that box.
What has been the most defining technological inflection point in your career?
Yeah, that's a good question. I just for context, I was an applications engineer in my 20s. I'm working on automation systems and drive systems for machinery, and at that time everything was analog. A lot of listeners on the podcast here might not realize what analog means, but it means there's lots of wires and lots of components. And for the longest time, that's what it was. I think if looking back, we would probably perhaps call it Industry 3.0 these days. So in terms of, some of the technological changes that have happened over the years that I've been working, probably the biggest one is the advent of digitalization. We already had the first digital controllers back in the 80s when I was working, PLC controllers, and they would work in their own world, controlling their piece of machinery. But as we were able to handle more data, it meant that we could produce more data, take more data out of a machine, out of a process. And I think that today people look back and call that industry. At the time, we were calling it Industry 4.0. We gave it a name, we marketed it, and we said this is the best thing. But my point has always been that that's been a linear process, in my opinion. We've always been applying new technology, and it's come every year. And, we've constantly been trying to make machinery run faster, more productively, more accurately, more flexibly. But the point where we produce systems which could collect and store and manage data, that was really, I think, an important point in the whole evolution of the manufacturing industry, at least. But the same also applies in power generation, power distribution, the electrification world. We're talking about smart grid these days, where we're able to suck more data and analyze our network much more accurately than we used to be able to do, because we can now handle the data that produces. So having that form of digitalization. But what I'd add on top of that is what we're now seeing is the advent of machine learning. In fact, it's been around for quite a few years now already, where we are able to take all of that data and have algorithms that can learn and read the data and analyze it and bring out information that an operator or a machine owner or a process or a public utility can then use to know more about their manufacturing process or their power distribution. So to be able to make decisions about, how to optimize it better. So, and a lot of other possibilities with machine learning. So it was analog, then it was digital with lots of data. And now we're learning how to use all of that data to make meaningful analyses out of that. So I think those are I don't think in my mind there's been one inflection point. I know that you can put names on it if you want to, but it's a constant process, and it's been going on for hundreds of years, I think. So that's on the technical side. But I will just say the way that we do business has changed dramatically over that period of time as well. And again, it's digitalization. I mean, I remember when I started off in a sales department, an international sales department. My job would be picking up the phone, a phone that sat on my desk. and talking to customers on the phone and writing quotations. And I would write those quotations with pen and paper and hand it to a woman. There's another conversation there about women's role in industry as well. Hand it over to a woman who would type it into a telex machine, which would send it off. And, I'd sit, and wait to get a telex reply at some point as well. So that's changed dramatically. Not just email, but the whole e-commerce. All of our order transactions these days are taking place electronically, and the way that we meet each other and talk has changed dramatically as well. So I think those are two really, transformations which I've seen. If you look at all of that, it's all about productivity, in my opinion. The way that we do our jobs, it's all about doing more within a certain time period or within a certain cost. And I touched on the last one, which we might come to talk about again, but women's role in the industry has changed like day and night from where it was when I started as well. So that's also a great development.
What do you feel about safety getting taken over by machine learning?
Well, I think with all of these things, there's a balance between when technology can take over a role from human and do that reliably and effectively and safely, and when it's not ready to do that yet. Especially if safety is concerned, you have to be really careful that there's so many things we don't know at the moment. You have to be really careful how you do that. But I have a machine learning example, which I think is really good, and it plays into safety as well. And it's a Canadian company. They were part of our Hannover Messe trip early in 2025. And they make a solution which is looking for foreign objects, debris on the runway. It can be highly dangerous. Concorde crashed because of something like that years ago. And they make a machine learning system which is analyzing cameras, which are already installed in many cases on the trucks that are driving around and on airport buildings. And they are teaching those cameras to recognize when there's something foreign, when there's a foreign object on the runway. So, you can scan those things by eye and maybe pick them out, but there is now AI solutions that are doing that, and they're able to give an early warning to say there's something laying on the runway over there and somebody needs to go and take a look at it. So that's an example where I think that really enhances our safety. So I think it's very much case by case. I'm not an alarmist when it comes to AI and machine learning. I think, you hear all these big stories in the news. The reality of it is industry is applying them in sensible ways already under that heading of machine learning rather than artificial intelligence. Ultimately, it's a very similar thing, but not the large language models, but actually applying machine learning algorithms on data which is coming out of existing systems. And I think that's where there's a huge thing happening, and it's generally all happening for the good. So, and it's continuation, in my opinion, of that trend of applying new technologies to make things better.
From your perspective, do you think as a collective sector, the niches within the industrial domains are ready to share knowledge between each other?
Yes, I do. And I think there's a huge amount to be gained by that, actually. And I'll mention the one that I'm just recently retired from, Phoenix Contacts, is they work in all of those industries. So they're very well placed to be able to say, we're applying this solution here in oil and gas, but it works very well in mining, mineral extraction. And they're able to take, provided they're not restricted by any kind of IP restriction, they're able to take those solutions to other places. And that sometimes means that, or at least in that case, it means that those industries don't have to reinvent the wheel that's already been used for 40, 50 years in another industry. And I think that's where there's a big opportunity. How do you make that work? Because if you went to one of those industries and you said, hey, please dedicate some people to seeing what we're doing over here, they're likely to say, yeah, we've got this, we're doing okay as we are.
You talked about engineering and sales. Those are so different from one another. And as an engineer getting into sales, what were some of the elements of what you had previously learned during your engineering application days, so right after graduation, to when you got into the technical sales role, those mindsets didn't work anymore?
Well, I think the difference was the people factor, which we come back to again and again. So in my engineering days, it's black and white. This is what you do. And everybody should immediately understand why that's better than the way it's been done before. You have to go from that world to, I now need to convince somebody else that that's the right thing to do. Explaining to people and convincing people that you you're genuine, you have a genuinely good offer for them. And before you get to discuss things like about price and terms and conditions, that was all the piece that I think I needed to add on to the engineering piece. It's more complicated than that as well, but that's the big piece. But I think since in a technical selling position, you're so often talking to other engineers, at least in the beginning, there's a there's a science that says maybe you shouldn't start there, but you end up talking to engineers. That sometimes is a very nice conversation because they get it too. And often you're sitting there having that conversation. You're both convinced. The question is how you are both going to convince his or her boss that that's the right thing to do. So it wasn't difficult for me to make that change. I think I always approached my job from being able to communicate what I was doing anyway. There's a vast difference in different people who are engineers. There are engineers who are very theoretical, want to do development work, design work, would rather work in a closed room with no distractions, perhaps. And then there are the other ones, like the applications world I came through, where it's all about getting out in the world with the technology. So
in Industry 4.0, what's your philosophy on leading people through uncertainty and disruption?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a number of fundamentals to it. As part of my history there, I landed in Japan in 1997 and took over a team of people and hired people and ultimately took those people into a joint venture with another Japanese company. And so that process was dramatic, as more dramatic than I can imagine, because it was a culture where change anyway is hard, and you're a foreigner from a foreign company in that market. And so there's a whole bunch of things. And I learned so much in that process that when I came to Canada, I use very much similar processes when I've had to do it here a few times as well. The first thing in what I always try to do is I will try to create the vision of what it looks like after we've done this transformation. And I'll engage the people that I'm working with as much as I can in helping to write that vision or create that vision. I mean, I know what it needs to look like, but I'll try to have everybody in the boat in terms of creating what that vision is. So that vision might be something like, we want our new company to be the technology leader in this area, or we want to, we might want to do something in a particular region. But whatever it is, it's about getting everybody to go, instead of looking down at what's in front of them, looking ahead and going, okay, I get where we're going and I buy into that. I would like to get there too. But if they don't know where that is, you don't get off the launch pad. You can go in and say, hey, guess what? The target's over there. Are we all on the same page? And everyone will go, yeah, and off we run, especially in North America. You can do that, I think. But in Japan, that doesn't work at all. So after a couple of false starts, I learned the importance of building consensus, putting the time in to make sure everybody realizes what the target is and buys in to the target. And what I also found in that process was you can get to a point where you've got one or two maybe abstainers in the group, but the majority of the group are like, no, we get it. And they will pull the other people in. And I didn't need to do that. I just needed to do enough to say that's where we want to go. And I had also to do it in the sense of, it's not about me. It's about us as the team. It's you. I won't be here at some point. You've got to get there. And I think putting the effort in at that stage really early makes all the difference. I'm a big believer in leading from the front on those things as well. So I would be the first person out doing those things as well. So if there are difficult meetings to go to, I would be the first person to go. If your team sees that not only do you speak that way, but you're actually going to the hard places to help get it done, then you get a lot of buy-in. And once you get that buy-in, then, like I said, the team will do it themselves down the road. So I think those are things that efforts I put into. I've done some management training, and I now do management or deliver management training as well. There's a model I often use, which is to say, there are 3 modes that you need to be in as a manager. I'm stealing this from somebody. One is you are the person making the decisions. Another one is you are in the team. So I would spend a lot of time, sleeves rolled up or out in the evening in amongst the team, just getting on with everybody. And then part of it is you as an individual, which is, getting out in front and doing those things. And I find if I'm doing those things, I'm conscious a lot actually of which mode I'm in at the moment. And I think those kind of things, they build trust, they build consensus. And if you get to that point, I think, your team can do anything, but you have to tell them early on, going back to my earlier point, what the vision is, what we're all trying to get to. So that's, I don't know that there's a perfect menu for that, but that's the kind of things I'm thinking about when I'm doing that. I don't have any military background interest particularly, but I have a military analogy here, which somebody told me about once, which is you're the commander of a battalion in the field and you've got your squad around you, they've been a bit beaten up and there's a hill in front of you and the message comes down to you that you've got to take the hill. And in that position, you want to make sure that when you start up the hill, that your team comes with you. And I'm often thinking about, is the team coming with me? Because if they're not, I better wait until they're ready and I better work a little bit more till they're all ready, because otherwise what we're going to try and do is not going to work. So those are kind of things that run through my mind.
Any Japanese philosophies that, maybe we didn't know so well around the world at that point in time, like Muda and, Kaizen and different things. But did you have a chance to weave those into your strategy when you were in Japan?
Not any of those. There were parts of our organization which ran on those models. We made a joint venture with a very well-known Japanese manufacturing company in the automation and motion world. And you went on one of their shop floors and that was the way they were all working. In the sales, it's again, another eye-opener for me was that in the sales environment within a Japanese organization, I should be careful what I say here, it was a bit more chaotic than I expected. And maybe it wasn't chaos, maybe it was organized chaos, but it wasn't working the way I thought it would be working. So no, there weren't any models in place there, but the things I would be bringing to that were things I'd learned on management training courses in the past. I did them with a big Siemens, with a big German organization. So I'd got a number of tools that I had in terms of how I'm gonna, how I can potentially deploy things. I mentioned one of them, and I would be using those. But what I was, it's going off the point slightly, but I found some really, really fascinating things. I lived there for 5 years. I lived there. I tried to speak as much Japanese as I was able to do. Some things would hit me between the eyes. And one of them was, being spoken to about quality. And after the Second World War, there was an American who went to live and work in Japan and was pushing. I'm going to have to look it up because I've forgotten his name now. But he was very much pushing the concept of quality. So that's where most of the Japanese manufacturing got their concept of quality. Like quality is 0 defects, which is a struggle for many of us coming in, because we're quite happy to deal with defects, but their mentality was no defects.
Was it W. Edwards Deming?
Yes, Dunning. Yes. So my Japanese colleagues would say, "You know this guy?" And I'm like, "I've never heard of this guy." And then, "No, he's extremely influential." And I'm thinking, well, not where I came from, but in Japan, he was extremely influential because of the mentality for quality that he built into manufacturing right after the war, they think about that till this day.
For our listeners, I'm going to provide a link for William Edwards Deming for those interested to learn a little bit more about him. In the 1900s, an American business theorist, composer, economist, industrial engineer, management consultant, statistician, and writer that Roger is referring to. He was the father of the quality movement and was hugely influential in post-World War II Japan, credited with revolutionizing Japan's industry and making it one of the most dominant economies in the world. He is best known for his theories of management, as written on Wikipedia. That is very interesting and was an unknown fact to me.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, unknown fact to me, but for all my colleagues, they knew all about him. And I went all that way to learn about an American.
Did you feel you needed to get on the plane to go back to the West now?
No, well, I was fascinated. I still am.
For sure.
Yeah.
Having led teams across continents now that you've shared your journey in Japan, Germany, how did you balance maintaining a consistent leadership identity while adapting to vastly different cultural and business environments?
Yeah. Um, I think there's a few, I mean, at the time, and you'll know this too, you're in the job. You don't have time to think about those things. It's only afterwards that you have the time to think about those things. So I think that there's one or two things that are fundamental maybe to my management style, leadership style, and then there's a lot of variables. And I think some of the fundamentals are the importance of the people in the organization. I mean, I know we all say people are important, but I always look at it like if we needed to make a change or if we need to do something differently, it's not about drawing the process on a piece of paper. It's about getting the team that we're in to all the things we just talked about buy-in and vision and everything. So I think I've applied that always, actually, probably back even in the UK back. I'm also very task driven. We have to get it done at the end of the day. I will, as well as my make sure the people are all okay piece, I'm also structuring the project and what we're trying to achieve into pieces with milestones. And I think that's also very important to do as well. I probably glossed over that with some of the questions, but I've done project management when I was an applications engineer, and I loved the making things into, dividing big tasks into small tasks, defining what they are, putting resources to them as well. So the variables, I think, though, is just the way, adapting to the way that the people on the other side of your communication are going to understand, receive, and apply that communication. And I think that's the variable piece. So I was in Germany for a couple of years, but never in a leadership position. But I've worked a lot with German colleagues since then. And I hope they don't mind me saying this, but there's a way to present information to them in a way that they're going to go, yeah, I understand what you're saying, and I agree. Hopefully, that's a different way of providing information than it would be to, for example, in Indonesia or in Malaysia or somewhere like that, where I was.
After being in the boats of engineering, leadership, and innovation, what do you hope people remember about how you solved problems, and what still drives your curiosity today?
Well, I've worked alongside all of the technological developments that we've had, but I haven't made those happen. I've been the person out applying them, basically. So there's no legacy for me in, the latest piece of technology. I didn't invent the internet or anything like that. So because I've now just recently retired. So yeah, I've had a bit of time of reflecting what I've done. And I think it sounds bizarre, maybe, but one of the things I look back on and take pride in is if I see people who I worked with who are now in more senior positions, maybe. So a really nice guy that I hired and worked with in Singapore, for example, senior role in China these days, leading businesses in China. And I mean, he was a smart guy. I just, hired him, gave him a chance, and some coaching perhaps. So that's one of the things. And if businesses that I worked with are still doing well, and I mean, after like 20, 30 years are still doing well, and I can think, okay, well, I had a bit of a hand in that. I look at LinkedIn every morning and I see folks that I've known for 20, 30 years. Some of them retiring these days, but some of them are going, great, look, I've got a new job. I'm now the senior vice president of this in Germany or something like that. So that's the kind of thing, I think. So what's my legacy? Hopefully my legacy is, some good people out there, some good leaders that I've helped to develop and to coach, and maybe they've gone on to do great things themselves. So I'm working with Next Generation Manufacturing, NGen, on the Hanover Messe and a couple of other little things for them as well. And I'm very interested in the technology that those small, mid-sized companies have got. I mentioned the airport foreign. That's one of those companies. And I thought that, and I thought, well, that's fantastic. Show me how that works. So I think I'm still very curious about technology. And I'm trying, when I get the chance, to use some of that experience to help those little companies do. I'm still doing that, I'm still trying to help them to do better as well. So I'm not giving up yet. I've semi-retired, but I've still got quite a few things that I'm doing.
Some of them I'm more familiar with in the short time that I've had a chance to learn about you and then have some conversations with you. But really, Roger, thank you for sharing your incredible journey from your engineering application days to supporting and leading transformation and making it all about people at a global scale. Your story reminds us that great leadership is both technical and human. It's about adapting to change while never losing sight of purpose. To our listeners, thank you for joining us. If this conversation inspired you, please share it with a friend, leave us a note, and remember, leadership is a motion, not a milestone. Until next time, stay learning and stay grounded at the same time.
Click.